In this video, I'm going to tell you why I think that Kickstarter might be the best thing that's ever happened to Games Workshop. Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. So, if this is your first time here, thanks very much for watching. Why not consider clicking the subscribe button so you don't miss any uploads from me when I talk about miniature games and board games. So you might be thinking, Games Workshop have never run a Kickstarter. What on earth is he talking about? Well, just make sure you watch all the way through and you'll understand. So I read something recently about the impact of Kickstarter on miniature gaming and board gaming businesses and just how it has made everyone up their game, up their quality and up their output. And this is where I think that Kickstarter really has helped Games Workshop. So if we go back about 10 or 15 years ago, Games Workshop certainly were the dominant force, and there wasn't really anyone around that could touch them. If you wanted to get into miniature gaming, you tended to get in through a Games Workshop game. Certainly you knew someone that played it, and you probably had easy access to a store that sold their miniatures. Now, it's very expensive for a new miniature game company, or a board game company for that matter, to start up making high quality components without a real burst of funding. And this is where Kickstarter really certainly helped out some of the Games Workshop's competition. It got them producing higher quality miniatures than they could probably afford to do without any kind of backing. So along come companies like Cool Mini or Not from a board game perspective, and they start churning out some really nice miniatures to go along with those board games. Think about Zombicide and how long that's been around. Then we have other companies like Mantic, who certainly use Kickstarter to their advantage to enable plastic tooling to enable them to produce high quantities of really good quality miniatures for an affordable price. Then we have many other companies who certainly jumped on the bandwagon of Kickstarter and really churned out some fantastic bits and pieces. Now when it comes to retail in game shops, one thing that is a real premium is shelf space, and one thing that has always sold pretty well is Games Workshop stuff. Now imagine that with the proliferation of Kickstarter, there's a bit of a challenger in town, and these are starting to fill up some of that shelf space of things that maybe fantasy weren't selling quite so well, or maybe even some of the 40k stuff had kind of dwindled off a little bit. Now I know that a majority of people probably bought their stuff from the internet and bought it online. However, to get new players into this, I'd imagine a lot of them saw stuff on the shelves in a hobby shop or a board game store, and this might be where they started to kind of get into the hobby. So fast forward a little bit time, as I was just talking there, and you'll find that now there are multiple game systems, as you can see behind me, many different companies that are making high quality miniatures. Now I would never say that Games Workshop miniatures have never been good quality. They've always probably been the pinnacle, certainly up there in the best kind of one or two. But when it came to the game systems, they really had to up their game to make sure they held onto their customers and certainly made it accessible for new customers. All of these different companies that were going to Kickstarter suddenly had a new market challenging them that they'd never really had before. There were companies jumping out of the woodwork, companies like Steamforged Games who'd never made a game before in their lives. There were a couple of guys who played War Machine who decided they could do that and pulled together a really good team of sculptors and designers and crafted Guild Ball, which went on to do really, really well. These kind of backroom sort of companies that had been around in the past now had a platform to really get up and running, and this was a challenge to Games Workshop. So it's because of Kickstarter, I believe, that Games Workshop really found that they had to up their game, they had to sort their rules out, the production values had to increase, and this has really driven them on to probably become the company that they are today. Now the downside of that is, because there is so much being released across the kind of the board gaming and the miniature gaming communities now, or companies I should say, Games Workshop had to also increase their output to make sure that they keep a hold of all of those customers. If you can't afford to wait 3 or 4 months now between releases, as people have already seen the next shiny thing and they've moved off down that track. Now this could be one of the reasons why Games Workshop constantly release new stuff, not always for the same game system, some for Necromunda, some for Blood Bowl, some for Shadespire or Night Vault as it is now, a bit for AOS and a bit for 40k. But it is a constant stream of stuff. I remember years ago that it was maybe one new thing a month, maybe one new model a month, or maybe one new rule set, every sort of game every 6 to 12 months. There's just so much coming out now that I honestly believe that Kickstarter has been one of the reasons that Games Workshop has not only upped its quality, but also upped its output. New companies getting into the miniature gaming world now really do have to do something special to hold their place and hold their customers. And that's why I think Kickstarter has probably been the best thing that's ever happened to board gaming and miniature gaming. Yes, we've seen some horror stories about companies going bust and people being left without the things that they backed. However, these are in the main few and far between versus the amount of successfully funded games and systems. Without Kickstarter and its influx of money into miniature and board gaming, I think Games Workshop might have just rested on their laurels and kept on going the way they were. So what do you think? Let me know down in the comments if you agree with me. Do you think I'm talking out of my rear end? Let me know if you think that Kickstarter has had an impact on Games Workshop. Have they really had to kind of change a few things that they do? Have they had to try and market in a different way? Have they really had to up their output to make sure that they block any advances from the young upstart competitors? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.